You've only got to do this 2 or 3 times before you begin to say, do they really know what they're talking about? Or is something wrong in the state of Denmark? And you've hit it on the head. Something is wrong. The whole attitude of many educators to students is a victim of Charles Darwin's evolutionary philosophy, so that if you believe the environment has developed us, then how do you discipline students? Well, you give them new carpets, you give them new desks, you give them new books, because it's the environment that determines. That's why they were so badly behaved. They didn't have the environment which made them better. Of course, the fact is we've given them new carpets, we've given them new books, we've given them new rooms, and they've graffitied all over the walls and they've ripped up the carpets, right? So therefore it is not the environment which is the cause, the result is the consequence. The cause, of course, is, as the biblical picture of creation says, man was made in God's image, right? So therefore we're pretty smart, right? But the problem is we chose to use our wits, our brains, our intelligence to rebel against our Creator, and the problem is therefore in us. It's not in this desk, it's in us. And if you're an educator, that needs to be your starting point. I have 50 students, 30 students, 1,000 students in front of me, and every one of them has a problem inside. I can't fix it by altering the environment outside. So even our prison systems would say, give him 20 years in the penitentiary and we'll change him into a new man. No, you won't change him into a new man unless the inside is changed.
We have voices saying that our public school system, I'm not talking about secular public school, but publicly available school system, like Christian school system, it proves to be best. We have a strong, and we can prove that, very well-working homeschooling movement in the United States. If a young couple with children would have this choice, what would be the best? I'm not asking you to say, well, this is the best option, but for the given society, what should we look at? Or maybe we should look at the core of what is being taught there.
I've just come from England, and of course part of the education system there is Tony Blair, even though he's on the Labour side of, the centre, as it were, has opened up a real can of worms with his favouring of what he calls his faith schools, where, yes, you can have these private schools, which are now, most of them, moving back towards a Christian basis. Okay, now, I made a point before that the teacher teaches the student he recognises in front of him depending on where he thinks the student came from. Is he an animal, or is he a degeneration of God's creation? What is he? Is he on the way up, or is he on the way down? Take your pick. When you have parents trying to decide about education, there's really a couple of things that people need to know. Number one, I'm looking at Romulus' campaign, and his IQ has not changed from the day he was conceived as a little cell in his mother's womb, right? It's embedded in your DNA, right? So schools do not improve a student's intelligence quota. He is born as smart as he's ever going to get. What they do is they either enable that to be expressed or they suppress it, right? In the case of the first one, if you want to enable it to be expressed, you will give the student the opportunity to learn. How does a student learn? Well, the information is not on the inside, the machinery is on the inside. The information is on the outside, so you need a good way to get that information into the student. Now, one reason why homeschooling has become incredibly popular in the USA, and it really is on the increase in the UK, almost to the point where it's threatening the government subsidies of public education, and the public school teachers know this, right? Why have they done this? Number one, because they see the public schooling system as expressing the theory of evolution, and that results in a drop in standards because we're on the way up, right? We're going to make it. The environment is the determiner, so therefore all of the old restraints about hitting a child or disciplining a child to cope with the sin within have been withdrawn. So as you know from reading newspapers, the behaviour in public educational schools has become a nightmare, right?
Yes.
You can't discipline kids for alcohol or drugs, or you have to give them social counselling and all that. You have to take all sorts of people.
We can't even tell parents that they're taking drugs somehow.
No, you can't do that, and you can't tell them they're wrong. right? The worst you can do is tell them it's socially unacceptable, right? So the students will grow up having no concept of right and wrong, and it reflects in their behaviour at school, at home, and they become unmanageable. So many parents are pulling their students out because of that reason. And really what they're doing is reverting to the old system we had, say, in Europe, when you had somebody who had enough money to afford a tutor. But in this case, they don't have enough money, so mum or dad becomes the tutor. Nothing wrong with that in principle. But if mum and dad doesn't have the information available to them, it will never get to the students, right? So therefore, I guess you could say the homeschooling movement in the USA is moving halfway back to the old organised educational system where a community, particularly a church community, would sum together enough money to pay a learned tutor to actually teach their children within a Christian framework, so that the tutor was authorised to discipline the kids, because these children actually were little sinners, right? And they needed to be saved, sanctified, turned into saints, right? So therefore, the whole discipline system, the traditional European discipline system, the traditional American one, has had a Christian worldview, which has been a creation basis. So that's a little bit of the background. It's not the method itself which is the problem, but the philosophy which goes behind it. I've had homeschoolers in the USA who basically pulled their kids out of the public education system because they didn't want the public education system to influence them. The trouble was they really didn't want anybody else to influence them. So those kids are some of the worst students I've ever come across, because mum and dad, well, they had no discipline, they couldn't stand authority, so they had utterly the wrong reason for trying to educate these kids themselves, and that is doomed for disaster.
www.creationresearch.net. Is there any source of information?
Yes, you will find there's lots of resources there. In fact, you receive our regular email newsletter, don't you? Every couple of weeks.
Yes, I do.
We send out the latest scientific information in words that the majority of lay people have no problem understanding, along with a creation Christian-based comment. And of course it reports on all of our debates, and if you want to know when you can get the DVD copy of the debate against John Polkinghorne, I've actually seen the master now, and it's good. So there's lots of resources there, and if people have got questions, just click on the search engine, and there's lots of information stored in there about all these subjects, and it's free.
If anyone wants any information, it's just, as I can remember, info@creationresearch.net, and
that will get to the
get
right
the answer,
person.
get the right information. Very good.
But that's on the website too, so you better give them the website again.
Yes, we will do that. So www.creationresearch.net. Mr. Mackay, at the end of our program, we have 1 or 2 minutes more. What is education? Wrap up.
What is education? To take out of somebody and give to somebody else. Right, the state of being informed. You will find, therefore, in your biblical picture, there is always a teacher and there are those who are learners, right? And if students themselves don't know or appreciate that this information is coming from higher to lower, or the teacher himself or herself does not appreciate that wisdom actually is needed to understand information, to turn it into useful educational stuff, the whole thing falls apart. So it is a pyramid. God at the top, teachers, parents next, and students down there, so that they can move up that pile.
Dear friends, remember the Sermon on the Mount, the Savior talking to people, the Savior educating people, the great teacher talking to his future students. This is why we do believe education is so important. This is why education is important. Thank you so much for being with us today. We are truly awaiting you for another session of the Verdicts of Science Creation. Have a blessed time with the Lord and with one another.